Okay, we'll try that again. So I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us. We do not often have members of the public here, so it's nice to have your participation. Just to get everyone on the same page, I'll briefly go through our agenda so you know what order to expect us to move through. So we'll start with an adoption of our minutes from our last meeting. We'll then have 2 rounds of public comment. One is specific to the project being reviewed, and that's the Great Shoals Winery. Then we'll have the public comment for our design consultation, the Junction. Once we've gone through those public comments, we'll then move on to the review of the sign for the winery, and then after that, the design consultation for the Junction. And then we've got a few board business items to go over. So with that, we can start with the minutes. Did anyone have any concerns or modifications to March? Okay. Then I'll move to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And all in favor? Okay. Simple enough. So do we have anyone here who is here for the winery? Are you the applicants? Okay, well then you're welcome to join us. Oh, no, sorry, I'm getting out of order. You're only the applicants. There's no additional public comment. No? Okay, apologies. We will go through the public comment for the Junction, then I'll ask you guys to join us up here. So for the public comment on the Junction, a few reminders. We are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. That's to keep things even and balanced while still giving opportunity for everyone to speak. I also would like to remind you all of the scope of this board. So we're the Facade Advisory Board, which means essentially that we review what's visible on buildings in Takoma Park's commercial district from the public right-of-way. So we've got our design guidelines that outline the types of things we review. And just as a reminder for today, those include setbacks, orientation, scale of the building, the overall mass of it, and then eventually the materials and some of the composition of the elevation. Today, the design consultation is specific to a site plan. They have provided elevations, so there'll be some conversation about that, but just keep in mind that that will be discussed, but none of this is an official or is a final review at this time as well. So, and I guess, Roz, I'll leave you to give some, logistically, I don't know if there's a preferred way to order this.
So if you'd like to make public comments, come to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes. There's a small mechanism that gives you a red light, a green light, yellow light, and an alert when you have 30 seconds left, and then a red light and a buzzer when you hit your 2-minute mark. So we ask that people be respectful of that. Please state your name and your address or ward you live in, either one. Thank you.
Oh, let's see. Okay. Now you should be set.
Okay. Hi, board. I'm Rick Weiss, former member of the FAB, actually some years ago. Thank you for your pursuit of your mission of harmonious and consistent construction with the quality and character of the local commercial district. 3 things I want to mention briefly. Scale. I think it's too big. I think it's too high. And if you look at the pictures of this thing next to our little co-op, it makes the little co-op seem like a little pillbox that is not in keeping with anything else in that area. The footprint is also too big, which results in some problems with dealing with trucks and garbage, which I'll mention in a minute. And the whole thing just feels out of scale and out of style compared to what is mostly going on at Takoma Park. I don't believe it's a Bethesdaization, as some people have called it, but I do fear it's a little bit of a Fort Tottenization. It's very familiar looking architecture, very familiar scale, but not to this town. It's not unique the way Takoma Park tries to be. Streetscape. I live on Pine Avenue. There used to be a dumpster in front of the place next to me that got moved in the back. There used to be a little parking lot on Carroll, you might remember, in front of one of the big houses there. That got moved in the back to Park Avenue. We got these nice sidewalks now with little colored tiles on them. We got nice historic street lamps. We've made Carroll Avenue a nice historic street. Why would we want to go backwards now and put a huge lay-by on the side with 18-wheelers and buses and trucks parked there and pollution and garbage dumpsters being rolled out across the sidewalk to bring the garbage out and pallets and who knows what to bring the materials in? It just seems completely wrong. Finally, I just want to mention unfinished business. There are a lot of things incomplete in this plan, including what's going on in the back. I think it's dangerous to get too far down the line in terms of your approval process without demanding more details. I'd like to remind you with what happened with this place. We had some wonderful plans, and then things went a little bit awry, and the value engineering showed up, and everything changed and got not so nice anymore. I think we should always keep in mind that that's a possible ending. We have a moat around this place. We don't want to end up in the same position on Carroll Avenue. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Excuse me.
I think you should give them extra time.
We're doing 2 minutes. You should be all set with the microphone.
Okay, I'm looking, there's 2 seconds on the.
Oh, I apologize. I have hit repeat. You now have 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Anderson, Woodland Avenue, about 200 yards from the site that's coming in. And I'd like to thank you, first of all, for your work. I'm a former chair of the Ethics Commission, and I know how hard our commissions work on things. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're 3 years into the project, but we've only had these plans for 6 days. And I think it's actually premature to begin to look and to add to and decide on things this evening. I don't think anybody's had a real chance to take a look at things. Still some time, I would suggest, to review. It's initial. There's no heights on the charts. It's basically sketches rather than an architectural design. There's an art section there. Nobody knows what the art is going to be. That hasn't been discussed at all. So what I'd say is take time. You know, I don't have a problem with an initial meeting tonight, but I'd be concerned if it went beyond just sort of a very basic initial kind of conceptual talk that's going on. And the other thing is, you know, what you may or may not know, I'm the vice president of the co-op, but what I'm saying tonight has absolutely nothing to do with the co-op. It is specifically as an individual citizen. 30 seconds to go. I yield my time. Thank you.
Are you all set?
I'm set.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Marielle. I live at 24 Manor Circle. I am a long-term Takoma Park resident, and I pass through the Junction area multiple times a day. I also live, as you know, as I stated, on Manor Circle, which has tremendous historic value for Takoma Park. I chose to live in Takoma Park when I moved to the East Coast because of its character. I very much appreciate that members of this committee and your predecessors have worked hard to maintain that, that value. I come from a mining community in northern Minnesota. There is no committee such as yours there, and it shows. It's one big hole that continually digs up the city. Now, for the development plan that is being considered, I really think the process is out of sync. The development plan was that we have before us was developed prior to traffic studies being incomplete. As a result, there are many details that are unknown. One of the jobs you have before you in terms of the overall picture of preservation is a slowed down, beautiful public space preservation. That does not seem forthcoming from this plan. For residents who live around the junction, traffic is good. Trash recycling will be brought out to the curb on a daily basis. The lay-by not only being a horror to traffic congestion, is completely unsightly. I really urge that no decision be taken here, because any comments in any decision making on this plan is out of sync with the process. The plan does not have enough details and was not built on enough information.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? All right, last call. Okay, thank you all for your input. We'll move on to the winery, but just a reminder in case anyone does have to step out, this will not be the last time this comes before our board. This is not, we are not making a decision tonight. This is a design consultation. So your input is appreciated, and the concerns about the timing, this meeting is not making a decision that will reflect any sort of rushed process. No, I'm sorry. All right, so we'll move on. Sorry, we'll move on to the winery. So if you guys could join us up here so that you're able to share the screen that will be seen and will also be shown up here. And then after this, we'll move on to the junction. Sure. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I will, just so I know which mic to turn on, which of you will be speaking. You're welcome to, okay, and you're welcome to join in. The system is set to only have one on at a time. So if you, the easiest way to let me know is to hit the button in front of you. Obviously you can say as well, but the mic is what picks up the recording. So it'd be great if we could keep our conversation within the microphone system. All right, so you should be all set.
Hi, my name is Matt Cimino. I'm the owner of Great Shoals Winery. We currently operate in a tasting room at Heiser Farm at 14526 New Hampshire Avenue. That's one block past where the ICC passes underneath New Hampshire Avenue. And we've been invited to find the new place for our tasting room because our current pedestrian traffic is too much for the farm to handle. We looked around the area and thought that Takoma Park might be a good place to move our tasting room. And through initial conversations with the town and the county, we've received preliminary support, and we found a location at 7050 Carroll Avenue, Unit 101. And tonight we present our design for our sign and request approval to move forward with this design.
Yeah, do you have, you've outlined some of the specifics here, but yeah, the kinds of things that help us in our decision include things you've outlined here, the location, the measurements and material, how it'll be attached, and then if you have any additional detail that you'd like to discuss.
Are there any specific questions that you'd like me to address that are not presented in the handout?
Okay, let's see. Lorraine, and then Eric, I'll turn to you afterward.
I'm assuming that the red area here is the size of the sign, and we should interpret it that way because you don't show the sign on top of the building, but you show this red area, so that is where the sign exactly goes, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Oh. All right, Eric, did you have a, oh, hold on. Now I've got you.
Yeah, are there plans to illuminate the sign? Or are we dealing with just the ambient lights or lighting?
Currently, there's electricity fed to the awning. It needs a little bit of updating and repair work. And depending on the state of the current fixtures, they may allow us to illuminate the sign.
So is there a design as far as the fixture that you would be using?
There
I
we
have
go.
not contemplated a design for illumination.
Okay, but there are guidelines for that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Willie, let's see. Oh, okay, great. Is that, yeah, that's yours.
Yeah. So the location of the sign, you say it's hanging from the awning, but the awning projects. So is it back towards the building or is it out towards the front of the awning?
Okay.
The sign will be mounted on the face of the face of the awning, where the red panel is. So the awning does project over the entryway, and the sign, as it's currently intended, will mount on the reddish area that's highlighted in the picture. The current occupants have a banner stapled to that location, and for our project tonight, we obscured the current sign that's on that awning.
But the plan is that it will hang in about the same location. So
It'll-
it's off the face of the
it'll be-
building, suspended above
It'll
the
be
door.
mounted on the awning.
On the awning, so there's a gap between where the sign is and where the building is, just so I'm understanding how this is showing up.
So the awning, as pictured, protrudes from the building approximately 48 inches. And our sign will mount on the face of the awning.
Got it. Let's see. All right. And we'll do Willie, and then I'll turn to you, Lorraine.
So, because you described that it has the stainless steel bolts and washers and nuts, and then I'm looking to the frame to which this then is attached, and I just sort of see 3 tubes, if you will, that support the awning. So if I'm saying that these stainless steel bolts are going to connect to the awning, how is it making its way to the structure of the awning frame if what I'm seeing here doesn't align with your red square?
Oh, apologies.
So technically, I don't know how it's going to, I don't know if it's, so that's my question.
My understanding is that
Oh, okay. And then Lorraine after his response.
My understanding is that the awning is a wooden structure, and the wooden panels of the awning are suspended by the frame that you see in the picture. So our sign would attach to the wooden face of the awning.
Okay, Lorraine.
Yeah, just because we don't have an as-is kind of photo, so it's a little hard to just picture it at this location. Is the awning slanted? Is it diagonal? Is it coming down? And this is a straight. Is it? I'm trying to picture how that's going to look and how, yeah, you're going to connect it, and. Because it's wood, it may look very different there because of how you're going to have to mount it. And it would be nice to have a before picture, actually, on this. I don't know. But is that awning kind of a diagonal awning? And how is it now, the awning? Is it?
Okay.
I believe the awning is perpendicular to the building without any angles. And the current sign is a vinyl banner that's attached with string and staples, so that the existing sign would be removed. And I believe our landlord is going to paint the awning to match the building. And so our sign would just simply replace the existing banner that's mounted under the awning, under the eaves of the awning. So the face of the sign plate, if you may, is recessed under the roof of the awning. So our sign would be slightly protected from the weather and mounted underneath the eaves of the awning. Does that help?
Let's see. Oh, follow up. Okay.
Yeah,
And then
just
we'll
a
turn to
quick,
Willie.
when are you going before the HPC on this? Have you filed? You have to get a historic area work permit for a sign. Are you in queue for that, or have you done that yet?
Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and we look forward to that opportunity.
Okay.
So just as a follow-on, and then I'll turn to you, Willie. Yeah, I think sort of you're here for a design review, but a part of the role of our board is that sort of helping to facilitate the process leading up to the county review, as Lorraine just mentioned. And I think you've heard some of the questions that have come out of the information you've provided, which is a helpful starting point. But the kinds of questions you're being asked are the kinds of things that help both us and the county understand what it is you're proposing so that we know what we're approving. So a simple drawing that shows the relationship of the sign to the existing building is helpful. You've got measurements written out, but it can often be helpful to have those actually laid onto the drawing. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to hire someone to do it, but just having some clean drawings that reflect it in different dimensions since it's standing out from the building. And Lorraine mentioned an existing photo, which can be helpful. The larger context of the building can be helpful. In this case, this building is stylistically not, it's unusual within the district. And so, it's important to understand the context that you're putting this sign into. And those kinds of things, I think, would help facilitate the county conversation, as well as ours. But, we're certainly as much here to do the review as to try to get you as ready as possible for the county review. So let's see, Willie, did you have a question that you wanted to? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. No, I actually covered most of it, but I just
Could you
because
speak into the, yeah.
yeah, because it's not a measured drawing. Usually, you would have a measured drawing saying this will be the sign is 30 inches, but really the 30 inches by 60 inches is totally out of context with the elevation of the building. I kind of, because I'm an architect, I kind of look at the doors, and I think that door is probably around 3 feet, and so when I look at the rectangle, so anyway, I'm just worried that the sign is going to look like it's part of the awning and not a sign that hangs from the awning. So it kind of looks like it's almost part of the awning structure and assembly, and if it more is a like a banner sign, because that's what you're doing, then I think it'd be more successful. That's all.
Okay.
I'm definitely open to ideas for alternative placements of the sign.
So with that in mind, do we want to move into our decision and recommendations that accompany that decision? I guess I'll just start by briefly saying, in that this is a sign, it's not making significant changes to the building. I'm comfortable with us making a decision and approving it based on whatever we'd like to outline as qualifiers. So Willie, you mentioned some concern about its relation to the awning. So is everyone on board with just at this point outlining what we'd like to see, or any concerns we have that we'd like our letter to reflect? Or are there any more questions before we do that?
I have an observation.
Okay, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if this would be helpful, but since you're not in queue with the HPC yet, I don't know if you would want to work with us a little bit on fleshing this out better. I don't know what your timeline is. We'd be happy to help you. I just throw that out. We want a winery, so we're dying to have you here. So this is great. So we don't want to hold that up. But I just throw that out because Willie is very knowledgeable on signs as an architect, and so thought I'd get his thoughts on that as well. What do you think? Do we need to do that?
No, I mean, looking at the sign and trying to project it onto the elevation, other than the red square, I think it's going to be okay. Like I say, it's just become convincing on its execution and more successful, like I said, if there was a true representation of its size relative to that elevation, so that you actually did measure, what's the full breadth of that awning from post to post? What dimension is that? And then when you say what elevation I'm going to mount the sign at. So it's just those kinds of things where if it's jammed up inside or it looks like it's a more part of the awning than it is a sign, then it just makes little things a little successful. But for the most part, the sign is fine, the location is fine. I think everything is just, really, it's about placement and the attachment. But anything else, I think it's fine.
Oh, yeah, sure, Ann, go ahead.
The sign has not been fabricated yet, is that right?
That's correct.
There you go.
So I guess if the concern is sort of proportion for the size of the sign and the size of the awning, since we don't know the size of the awning exactly, is there something we can just condition? I mean, they haven't made the sign yet, so the dimensions are.
I just think 30 by 60 is probably the right size of the sign. I don't think it's too big. Yeah. And knowing that there's a double door here, and I'm just trying to, again, kind of scale of things, and it is a kind of tight little entry. Scaling-wise, I said I think it's fine,
Okay.
30 by 60.
Okay.
So are there any concerns about what we'd like to see? I guess I feel like we're in a place where we can, for our purposes, review and approve. You're certainly welcome to still send information our way if you feel like you would like some direction, or you could send us a document to take a look at to see if it lines up with what we're describing to you tonight. But that would mean you could essentially check us off your list. It's just, Roz will be providing a letter that you would need to go to the county. So are we, in terms of that letter, are there any conditions that you'd like to add? I know you voiced some concern about the structure. I think I similarly kind of wonder about how the structure will work out, but I don't think it's something that falls within our purview. I mean, if, you've got bigger issues than the facade aesthetics if the structure doesn't hold. So maybe just note that as something to make sure you're looking at. But okay. Yes.
Thank you for your feedback. We're very excited to be here. We are on the docket for our licensing June 7th. So we have a few weeks before we are going to be ready to move in.
Great. Okay, so I take it that there's no qualifiers. I'll move to approve this. Oh, did you have? Yeah, certainly, Eric. Thank you.
It just comes to mind that it's not that we're easy. I mean, because we want you here, obviously, but we're an easier group to deal with than when you go to the county. So if we can consult with you on this, as well as saying that everything looks good, it'll be easier for you once you go upwards. Yeah.
You want to come back in May.
Okay, so I'll move to approve the application. And seconds, all in favor? Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time and good luck.
I'll be in touch.
Okay. So now we are moving on to our design consultation for the junction. So you're welcome to join us up here. And for this, we will have the presentations on the screen, correct? Is great. Okay. Yeah, so you should have control of it, and that'll correspond to what we're seeing and what's being shown on the screens on either side. Let me know if that's not panning out, and I will turn on your microphone. Okay?
Okay. I'm just going to advance. Yep, I have control. I'm Colin Green with Street Sense. I'm the...
and your colleagues are welcome to join you up here.
Great.
We do have room for everyone, so thank you.
and I am joined by two of my colleagues in the project, actually the developers for the project, Neighborhood Development Company. And this evening, we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you on the consulting basis to sort of show you where we are with the project. And was asked to sort of do a brief run through some of the elements in this presentation, which were really part of the City Council meeting. I'll probably speed through some. If you want me to back up or go forward, we can do that. But I'm hoping to just take a few minutes to kind of run through and tell you where we are, as the subject matter is really germane to your board. So thanks for doing that. As you know, we have been working on the project for quite some time, and it is more than really just a building design. It's an opportunity to bring some life to this part of Takoma Park. The site area is the area shown in white. That's the full site, all of the properties that are combined together to form the Takoma Junction project. And just a little bit about where it sits. Carroll Avenue is the northern boundary. Columbia Avenue is kind of our southern side. There's quite a bit of falling grade behind the existing parking lot. And then we're bounded on the west side by the Healy Surgeons building, which is existing today, and the Takoma Park Silver Spring Food Co-op on the east side. There's a building on the site right now that will be gone in the future, which is the auto clinic. It's basically over to the left-hand side of this diagram. Just from a site plan perspective, just to show the position of the building, everything that's colored here is actually part of the Takoma Junction building. On the left-hand side is an access way to get to the underground parking, and we're about 10 feet away from the co-op building, which provides us with a service corridor on the eastern side. In terms of I wanted to talk a little bit about the setback, the scale, and the massing, just to give you a feel for kind of what our project looks like today. This is a view standing from sort of southbound Carroll Avenue. If your right-hand side was at the bakery and you were looking toward the parking lot, this is what we're proposing for the construction of Takoma Junction on the parking lot. And I'll go through the floor plans a little bit, but a view coming from the fire station side looking toward Ethan Allen. So the project is to the right. Just to show the difference in modulation and scale of some of the different components of the building. As the scale of the site is quite long from end to end, we wanted to look at ways to break down that scale and have the building show some movement along that passageway along Carroll Avenue. And then a view looking back toward the west. Standing on the sidewalk, this is our project to the left, and to the right, Carroll Avenue out toward the right-hand side. We're interested in ensuring that we have a lot of vibrancy at the ground plane, that we fit in with the context of the neighborhood, and that we actually can create some of these public spaces and other things that are away from the building as part of this project. From the building plans perspective, the level below ground is where the parking is supplied. The white dashed line is important, I think, for this board to think about. This is basically not the property line or a setback line. It's the line of the existing Turner building that the co-op occupies, brought straight across the site. Underground, we feel like we can come underneath that and project forward to get more space for the parking below grade. As we come above grade, we're using that really as our forwardmost portion of the building facade. We're in line with the building toward the right-hand side. We step back a ways as we move to the left. You can see an indent there, which is a helpful device to help us promote some of the public space that we can use the sidewalk realm for. And then the small gray rectangle on the left-hand side is a vertical circulation stair and elevator tower, which again is back to that line of frontage consistent with the co-op at the other end. The building itself then goes up one more floor of what we're promoting as office and workspace. We don't have a specific tenant at this point. that space could be divided up with a hallway and be multi-tenant, or it could satisfy the needs of somebody up to about 25,000 square feet. We're looking for a whole host of ideas right now for the tenants of that space, but we have anticipated activating. We are not looking at ways to actually project from that building envelope outward, save for just above that indent point. So we have one balcony that we're proposing at the second level that goes kind of in between those two indent points at the front of the project. And then the roof plan basically accommodates some green roof and sustainability techniques. It's behind a parapet wall all the way around. And then the elevator component actually does stick up a little bit above that so that we can get access to it. So we can use that vertical circulation, not just for circulation within the building, but to get roof access as well. From the elevation standpoint, and at this point we have front elevations, we definitely understand the need to look at all of the sides of the building. At this point in time, we were focused primarily on Carroll Avenue, so we'd be excited to bring that kind of stuff forward. We're going to be working with the city and the council through the next coming weeks to talk about some of those elements as well. The red lines basically identify the property. It's about 240 feet from one side all the way to the other. And so it was important to us to think about ways to break down the scale, relate to the buildings next to it, and look at ways to modulate, like I said, that facade backwards and forwards. Starting from the left-hand side, that small red piece is a little over 35 feet high. The farthest point to the right, where the stair tower is currently shown at about 45 feet. It's, like I said, two-story building. Since it's retail space, that awning canopy structure, which is in line with the other buildings that surround it, is about 20 feet above the sidewalk. Gives a nice protected level. It also, or sidewalk, it also helps with our vibrancy and flexibility of that retail space. So it appeals to a number of different kinds of users that get a lot of light and storefront. As we moved kind of from left to right, the components that we were most focused on at the ground plane were ideas of flexibility, openness, welcoming, that some of these retailers could actually have their storefronts be the kind that you could, if you look at the two middle pictures, either open up completely or be served across the glass, so that there's a relationship between the street and the storefront. We were looking for an architectural vocabulary that accommodated permanence, but also looked at a familiarity, not necessarily trying to be an historical reference to any particular building, but something that would last for a long time and be able to accommodate the different uses that we have in this building and be identifiable from the outside. As we move upstairs, we're looking for the kinds of spaces that promote a lot of light and air into the building, so grouped windows, the ability to have those windows open so that there's fresh air and daylight into all of the spaces on the upper level, and to create a rhythm across the building that still signifies that this is kind of one place. We also looked at the piece that steps back about 10 feet from the rest of the building, has an opportunity for an art installation rather than simply providing the standard fare of building railings, et cetera, where there are balconies. We have not yet settled on that dialogue in terms of how that art gets placed on that building. But some of the ideas at the ground plane are from the images that you're seeing down below, that we want people to enjoy this building whether they're a customer in one of the shops or whether they're a passerby. And so it's important to us to reflect all of these different kinds of uses at the ground plane. As I mentioned, the idea of art is something that our team is really focused on trying to promote with the city and understand how we can have something that actually converses with the public realm. A lot of times that art is great, but it may be relegated to the back of a building or to a side that doesn't have any affectation. We think there's an opportunity here to really engage with the public space. And then the final element as you move to the west or to the right-hand side is this idea of a little bit more of an object. There's the vertical circulation that runs from the garage level all the way up through the building and accommodates people that are using that parking, whether they're an office user or just coming to street level. And that really gave us an opportunity to think about something that was a little bit unprecedented in Takoma Park, a vertical element that may sort of signal the beginning of the project as you come around the corner from the fire station, could be more transparent and show some of that movement and life inside the building. And so that's why we went with some of the imagery down below to show translucence, to show transparency, and to show a lightness that could actually be used for a lighting piece and really signify that this is a place that we want to draw people to. I think the rest is mostly about the sidewalk realm, which I'm happy to kind of run through real quickly, if you like.
A quick
Okay.
review of it would be great,
Sure.
and we can go back to anything that anyone has questions about within it.
Okay. There is a lot happening between our building and the curb edge, and so we wanted to work very carefully to understand how those different uses combine, how we keep people out of places that are automotive primarily, how we accommodate people of all ages passing through, et cetera. And so we've been working on a series of ways that the building relates to the street. This is a section through the widest part of the sidewalk. Carroll Avenue is out to the right, and our building is to the left. You can see the parking kind of coming underneath the public realm area, but not quite to the property line. And then how much space we have to perform things other than just sort of outdoor dining. We really want this to be a piece that people can use, whether they're shopping here or whether they're just passing by. And so that idea of public space is very important. We're still working with our team, which includes landscape architects, civil engineers, transportation experts, to understand how all of these elements kind of align and distribute themselves across this section. This is through one of the more narrow sections, or sort of the more regular sections of streetscape. It does show the lay-by element adjacent to Carroll Avenue, and how we're proposing to separate that loading zone area with bollards or other physical devices before we get to the more protected pedestrian zones where we really mean people to be. And we're working, like I said, at the early stages, of course, to help design those elements and understand how the context of this place can speak to the greater context of Takoma Park and how people can feel welcome. But again, understanding the issues of permanence and maintenance and thriving plant life, et cetera, is an important issue to us. I guess it's probably worth noting that the back section of the site that says treed area is not development from our standpoint, although it is important to note that it's going through a regulatory process of understanding what we need to do to clean that part of the site up, what will be remaining in terms of what happens later, what can people expect to see 6 months after construction versus 10 years after construction. So that's another part of the conversation about what the back of the building will look like, because we need to make sure we're understanding what will stay and what will go. We see it as a green site, a place that is protected, and a site that we have the opportunity to actually kind of clean up and restore. So that's our attitude toward the treed area in the back. And a few elements of the sustainability language that we're exploring for the project. Some of these are building related, some of them are walkability related, and that we're trying to optimize all of these different components. As a two-story building, it still has complexities that need to be worked out, and we're going for the LEED Gold certification on the project. And these are just a highlighted few of the things that we can do to accommodate that standard. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to start us off with questions or a response? Willie? Okay.
Okay. So, you were before this board before, I think it was like a year and a half ago?
Or more. It's
I
been
think it was-
quite a while.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of difference between the two. So we did comment on the idea that there is the storefront articulation that really is throughout Takoma Park, whether it's in Takoma Junction or Old Town. The treatment of that storefront is mid-century modern, and really the idea of the scale, I think before you were like at 3 stories, perhaps. You're down to 2 stories. That's much of what downtown, Old Town is. It's 2 stories. There is actually a higher building in downtown. So, and this is Takoma Park. It's a city. It's not we do have houses, but we do have our commercial districts. And I think that those elements that can support the, the residential, just going to work in the morning and stopping off on your way, if anything that there then supports that is great. The other thing also, which is important, is creating the edge. If you go to Old Town and much of what's on along Takoma Junction, when it turns along the street, is creating that edge, which I think is very important. And so the edge here that you kind of make a gesture to on both sides of the property, and then open up that place in front, I think it's important that as details to create that sense of place. So really the sense of place, which across the street needs a lot of help for, although I think they're doing a really nice job, starting with the bread place now to the restaurant. I think it's migration as those storefronts and those buildings are being developed, which actually has been in front of these boards, and we made these comments, and I think there's some really good results there. And I'd like to see that continue on down. So, and this across the street, I think it's much in keeping with, quite frankly, that further development of, which could be a very nice place, rather than like as it is now, which is, it's parking lot, which is kind of unfortunate. So in my mind, the only thing that I'm really concerned with, and I think was part of what was mentioned here, there's a lot of detail here. As architecture, I can see the elements that will be done. There's landscaping here. There's a green roof. There is, so a lot of these things is, it's a matter of the retail in the office from a perspective needs support how all that is, the budget, basically. So my concern, my only real concern on this project would be the maintaining, seeing that it looks like this, feels like this, the materiality is like this when it's done. When it goes through, which is a good term, value engineering, which all projects go through, which is going to be a challenge, it is how you then deal with that and not erode, what you're presenting. So that is my biggest concern, would be the value engineering, but other than that, as far as it's being a sense of place and all that, so that's my, okay.
Thank you. Next. Or let's see. Did you have a response? Oh, okay. Great. Thank you. All right. And Lorraine.
Okay. I actually do have some comments for you and some questions. Is this a 40-foot building essentially then? Are we talking about a 40-foot building here? And
Lorraine, I'll turn for that question, then I'll come back to you. I apologize. So just to the first, you're fine. It is on for the applicants. Mike, if you wanted to respond to the 40-foot, and then we'll come back to Lorraine. Apologies.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of different points on the project, but essentially, yes. The piece all the way to the right where the stair tower is at 45 feet. The building, as you move across, between 36 and 39 feet, depending on the top of the coping there. And then at the far left, where the little red section is at about 36 feet.
Okay, Lorraine, hold on. Yep, hold on just a sec. Okay, you're all set.
Okay. I feel somewhat at a disadvantage because we don't have schematics with heights or widths on them, and I think in numbers, and I really need to see them when I'm formulating concerns. And I think the next time you should be sure to do that. I'm sure the community would appreciate it as well. It's a two-story building that's really 40 feet tall and perhaps taller. That doesn't sound like a two-story building to me. And I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about the scale of this building. And there's certainly things that I appreciate about the building. I appreciate a traditional approach to the design, not a modernistic one. I really do. And I'll start with that. I mean, I appreciate the transition that I see you trying to do with the co-op by lowering the height of the building there and having it with a brick facade. I think that's a positive thing. I'm very concerned about the glassy tower on the other end. I don't think it fits well in the Takoma Park community, and I'm concerned about that design element. I certainly like turnbuckles and canopies because historic Takoma has a building with turnbuckles and a metal canopy, and so I think that a charming feature. I like transoms. I appreciate that you did all that, but in my mind, I'm very worried about it being overwhelming. And I don't understand why you need a 20-foot height to the first floor. I simply don't. Even in the District of Columbia, they require 15 feet, and suddenly we're 20. And so I need to understand that better, but I think a 40-foot building is not a two-story building. It just is not. And so my concern is it needs to come down in height because that's a low area. And yes, it will be taller, but it looks far too tall at the moment. And can you give me a height of the co-op building?
Okay. You should be all set to respond.
Sure. The co-op building is a little over 20 feet. So as a one-story building at 20 feet, we're using the same datum for our ground floor. I appreciate the reference to the district and the 15 feet. Typically, that's one of two reasons that number is usually different than 20. Either it's a clear height space on the inside dimension for good retail practice, or it's in order to get through the height limit overall. So they actually compress a lot of their ground floors in order to get an extra floor out of the restricted height limit in that condition. So the 20 feet in our building is floor to floor, so it includes the structure in between. So the interior space is somewhere around 16 plus or minus, with structure and other things that are happening in that space, up to 18. That really promotes a really flexible space for tenant spaces. They can do a lot with that. They like the light and air that comes into the building. So that's where we were with that ground plane.
Okay, sorry. Just referencing our building, historic Tacoma's ceilings are about 13 feet. That's plenty high. I really think you can bring this down in some way and lower this building some way, and I really urge you to look at that and see what you can do about it. I have concerns about the elevator being located on the far side from the co-op where people are going to need it. So you're a neighborhood development company, so you realize that it's a neighborhood, so we have to have an elevator where people can get down to their cars, right? And yet you cannot put a disparate element or a tall element on the other side. It has to be compatible with the co-op building, and I like what you did on that side. And so it becomes clear to me that you need two elevators. You need an elevator that is going to be in that close-end side by the co-op so the shoppers can get down there and will use the co-op rather than make them walk all the way down to the end, which makes no sense to me. And perhaps you could design an internal elevator to get to the top floor on the other side, because that seems to be what's driving this tall glassy tower. And if you could figure out a way to change that and to lower it and also transition better with Healy on the other side, that would be a lot better, and have an elevator somehow work it out on the interior space to take people to the upper floor, because that's what you need. I think that would certainly help a lot. I have more, but I don't know whether anybody else, am I the only one asking questions? Or?
Well, at the moment you have the mic. I meant to acknowledge this at the start. Roz has prepared a summary sheet for us. If that helps structure any more remaining comments. It's a list of characteristics. It's the same list that is provided in the design guides that we've seen and that are available on the website. But if it does help any remaining comments, that's a helpful reference that I meant to draw attention to earlier. You had one more comment, and then I'll turn it to either Anne or Willie, who just requested.
Are you guys waiting, or do you want
They can wait if you're
okay.
got a little bit more.
Yeah.
Nope, I apologize.
Okay.
Now you're all set.
I'm getting trained to it too. To watch
Yep.
for the
No,
red
we're all
light.
getting there.
Yeah, that's
Thank
right.
you.
So, I'm concerned about the setback and the lay-by, and I don't think there's enough room there. And when I look at that truck and I recognize what's going to happen there, we may have trucks, side by side even, or behind each other. And it's hard for me to envision a community space that's right by a lay-by. And I wonder if you can push the building back further to get further away from that. I think that would be a big relief. I think that's something you need to consider. And trash handling, I'm very worried about where the dumpster is going to be, because you're showing a restaurant, but I don't understand your spaces. So we have terrible dumpster problems with neighborhoods here, and this is a major issue. So how are you going to get the trash from the restaurant to the corridor over, I guess, near the co-op? And how, I don't know the width of it because it's not marked here. How is one of those massive trash loading trucks from Waste Management going to get in here and hook that dumpster up and flip it backward and then back out of this? How is that going to work? It's going to have to happen right along the sidewalk here. I just can't envision how you're getting a dumpster to work here at all. And yet you're showing a restaurant and you're going to have food-related things. I cannot underscore what a problem that is in Takoma Park. So I'd like you to talk about how you're dealing with your dumpster.
All right, and your mic is now on to respond. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If you look at the image that's on the screen, we expect that, first of all, there would be one contractor for this project, so we could organize and make efficient the pickup times and schedule them so that they all happen at the same time. One other thing is that we don't expect to have one single dumpster for the project. We actually have a couple of different ways for dealing with the trash dependent on the different tenants. So the corridors are important to us to bring trash actually from some of these other users to a trash room, which is located on the far right-hand side behind the stair. There's a trash room there, which opens to the interior where the corridor space attaches, and then has a set of doors that lead out to that lighter gray corridor where at the necessary time for pickup, smaller dumpsters would be taken out to the curbside for pickup through that corridor. We have explored opportunities for some of the restaurants, depending on the users, whether they need to chill trash, whether they keep it in their space and then wheel it out to the common space. So we've used all of those different kinds of techniques for different restaurant users that we've designed spaces for. But we expect everything to be centrally managed, come out to the space that is closest to the corridor, and then be brought out to the curbside at trash time, lifted, and then put back into the project. So they wouldn't sit out for any lengthy period of time.
So Lorraine, do you have a follow-up? Okay.
Yeah.
You're all set. Oh, now you're all
Okay,
set.
all right. I see the room and I see the doors. Are you saying that the truck, the waste management truck that comes in here is going to drive into this corridor? Is it wide enough? Okay,
Oh. All right. Sorry, Lorraine, are you?
that's a question.
Okay. And all right.
How exactly?
All of the trash pickup would happen also from the lay-by. The dumpsters would be rolled out to the point where the front edge of the lay-by is. The corridor is only used for pallets, hand trucks, pallet jacks, and those kinds of deliveries. It's 10 feet wide and allows for the deliveries from the street to come through that building and then enter our building to the left on this picture.
Okay. So, Lorraine, can we move to another? If you want to ask a follow-up, we can after. Can we move to a few other comments and then we can come back to you? Okay. Let's see. Anne, is that? Let me switch this over. You're all set.
Hi. I just had a few quick questions, some of them about the site plan and about the streetscape and public realm. The green roof, is that for the building tenants only? That's not a public amenity, is that right?
The blue space that you see in the diagram here is for tenants of the building. That's about a 750 square foot space, which means we just need one way off the building if we keep it to that dimension. The green roof area is primarily intended to be a sustainability feature, and so to effectively handle things like stormwater management and cooling the building, et cetera. So yes, just that small portion by the elevator and only for members, for tenants of the building. We kind of went through the public dialogue, and it was pretty loud and clear that people didn't want a lot of noise and activity up there from a public space perspective, which we could handle in some of the other portions of the building, frankly.
Okay, Anne.
I'm curious, how many parking spaces are you providing, and how many are actually required?
Right now, what we're showing in our plan is 72 spaces. That may or may not change as we get to requirements for ADA, compact spaces, et cetera, but we've kind of consistently remained at 72 spaces. The requirements, we've started to work with the county. We've worked with tenant standards. We feel like we would probably be at or near a number that is required by the users of the building, but we'd be working with the county to understand what their limitations are going to be and what requirements they're going to have on the table based on the use. So not being cagey, but we're working with them to understand whether the right amount is per regulation, per requirement, or per user. That'll continue through the process, but we're only planning one level deck under the building.
So the idea is people who are using this building either would come by foot or they would use the parking, but this isn't intended to be a parking lot for the co-op. Is that correct?
We're working right now to determine how many spaces we can deliver to the co-op should they want them. We've talked about that throughout the process. We want people to be able to use this deck. It is not reserved for the project only, but we haven't negotiated any of that at this point for numbers of spaces or locations.
And then I think I just had one more. One thing I should have started with is the architectural features that Willie and Lorraine complimented. I agree. I like the operable windows and some of the details. So. I concur with them. My last question actually it was on slide 26, and it was showing that sort of the public seating area that's not just for the restaurant, but oh, maybe it wasn't 26. I wrote 26. Oh yeah, it is 26, sorry. So those concrete blocks for seating area, I don't think that's the most successful choice for this area. So I would just be a suggestion if there's some other communal seating choice that you have in your design. I think that would be better for Takoma Park and just for sort of being a little more natural. And I don't think I have any other questions at this time.
Eric, did you have anything you would like to add?
No, my perspective is.
Oh, okay. Now you're all
My
set.
perspective is different. My shop is right across the street. I've watched that parking lot now for 45 years. I've had customers come in and wonder about some of the changes downtown Takoma Park, that it's looking, what do they think this is, Bethesda? And this here, it looks very pretty. It doesn't look like Takoma Park. It looks like a, you know, if you go to Rockville, you'll see Park and Rose and Pike and Rose, and that's what it looks like. So as far as the character involved, there's not much street traffic across the street now. The parking lot had a problem because people would park in the parking lot, and although it's a, you know, it's a good 3/4 mile walk to the metro, oh, they would do it just for physical fitness and whatever. Now they had a place to park. So Takoma decided, okay, we're going to start paying for the parking. Now, you haven't mentioned anything about, you said that the parking is, you know, for the use of those buildings. Are we paying to park in that, on that parking deck? And if not, how do we control the fact that someone parks the car there and goes visits a friend or goes on the metro? Has that been addressed at all?
The parking will be open for everyone, including the co-op. We will work with the co-op in terms of validation, but it will be a park for everyone.
So I could park there and go to the metro?
Possibly, you have to pay for that.
So it is a paid parking lot.
Paid parking,
so that
validation
does address your
for the
concern about
users.
long term.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
Will
Oh,
be a
hold on, Eric.
gate,
Let me turn your. There
some
you go.
kind of a gate situation, so you pay to park. Okay.
Okay. Lorraine, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up. I have another question too, but I wanted to follow up on the parking. So, what I've been hearing that it's essentially going to be private parking that is for the use of your tenants, and I want to just lay that out there because publicly, so we can talk about it, because Historic Tacoma has events, for example, and right now we don't have to worry about having a speaker or having people come, and people can use the city lot as they need it and they pay and they go. I'd like to know if you're going to have metered parking like that, because believe me, as a nonprofit, Historic Tacoma is not going to be able to purchase lots from you for 20 people for a talk in the evening. And so I'm a little concerned that we may be losing true public parking with this that we have now on our public land. What is your response?
It's not private parking, it's public parking.
And so it'll be metered in some way that an individual could come for a 2-hour meeting and go.
And just as Alex said, we're still working out details of how many spaces will be for what purpose, whether we can provide and how we provide validation for users of the project, the co-op, et cetera. But it is a public lot.
Lorraine, are you? Oh, okay.
On another matter, the bioretention pond that you show, or bioretention, I'm assuming that's going to be for the runoff from the large development, and is that going to be a pond? What is that going to be? Standing water? We have no, and how is that going to be to the Columbia Avenue people? And I'm also interested in how much you're intruding into the wooded area Of course, we don't have an elevation or a rendering to see what the back of it looks like, but I am concerned about that. So what are your thoughts on that?
So right now we're working with our civil engineers on the project AMT, who are going through the process of understanding, based on the size and the requirements and the footprint of the building, how much runoff there will be, where it gets located, how it runs off into public facilities out in the front versus in the back. My understanding, not being a civil engineer, is that the stormwater management area, if you will, is essentially right behind the black line on this, prior to that treed area. So I don't have answers for volume. They do. I don't know them off the top of my head. It is not intended to be, as I understand it, a standing water type of facility. It's something that works with the grade, is very low impact, and is something that actually helps make sure that that's managed to the right scale and doesn't create problems downstream. Basically, the low side of the site is the point at the bottom, and so that's where the water essentially will run. We're trying to manage how much of that runoff we have by using things like bioretention facilities, using other stormwater management techniques rather than ponds to make sure that we can get infiltration. And it's a major reason why we're looking at the vegetative roof on the top as well, so that we can do these things in small pieces, a variety of ways, and avoid those conflicts that you're describing.
Could you go to an elevation, just so I can have that for reference? So going back to some of Willie's comments about the relationship of the building to the junction as a whole, I think his point about the edge is important. I think if anything, I'm concerned about having public space that's not activated, and it, to some extent, can become an extension of some of the other underutilized public spaces. I appreciate your outlining the relationship of the facade to the co-op. I see how that makes sense. And I think the push-pull that you've established within the elevation, I can see how that's starting to promote that variety of spaces. But I think that's important to how, on a site plan level, this building relates to the junction. Stylistically, I disagree with the other comments. That's the nature of design in historic districts. There's sort of indefinitely a split between wanting something that reflects the buildings around it versus wanting something that strongly differentiates and reflects the time at which we're in. I fall in the time in which we're in camp. I think there's the two concerns that I think trying to replicate historic features brings up is one in the material. Willie mentioned the value engineering process. Often I think historic details can get muddled, and in contemporary construction can really lose the quality that they can bring. So if that's not monitored, I think that that portion of the facade that's traditional has some potential to fail to replicate the degree to which it's intended to at this point. And that can really just turn into a muddled building. One thing that struck me looking at this was that the relationship of the traditional space to the contemporary style, to some extent kind of mimics the DC tendency to leave the facades of historic buildings and then back new ones up to it. I don't have a specific comment. Yeah, as Lorraine just mentioned, facadomy is a word that gets used to describe it. It struck me as kind of odd. I don't have a specific recommendation or something that I would definitely want to see, but I think it's that relationship between the old and the new style I appreciate, but I think it's tricky. So I'm curious to see kind of how you bring that forward. My architectural preference is to have the buildings stand in their time. I think as the sort of the second concern with those types of buildings that replicate the traditional buildings around them is that when you think, say, 50 years down the line and people are looking back at Takoma Park, what are the buildings that define Takoma Park in the post-war years? It's buildings that reflect that period. It's not to say that they don't draw from past styles, but then what is the style that this is going to be the major development that happens in this city that represents this period of time. And so I wonder if, you've explained well the relationship of the building to the site constraints and to the programming. I wonder if you have a sort of central vision for the concept that's driving this, and if that, how, to some extent it's just the narrative, but it's also how is that expressed in the design. You know, I think the more it can express the nature of the design as it stands, as opposed to picking and choosing from styles around it, the stronger a design can be. Let's see, and Willie, did you have something to add? Okay.
I think you make an excellent point. Needs to be a piece that's in scale with current. So I agree with some of the detail that actually if you went a little more modern, it'd be in my respect, fine. I think the scale is there, and again, it's the interpretation of what you see in Old Town. The scale, the detail, the proportion, but it's a modern interpretation of that. And so I think that in some sense, there's components there that do that, and others parts don't. So I think that's a good point. One thing that may be helpful as far as scale is concerned, when you do the elevation, you might want to do one which extends around the corner a little bit. That also includes the firehouse. Because it's more of a building in scale with this building. And so that's really, again, that's what everybody sees. So when everybody wants to understand Takoma Junction, it doesn't stop at the Healy building. It extends around and there's another junction there, if you will. So those are my comments. Thanks.
All right, anything else? Lorraine, yeah? Okay.
So I think we may have a disagreement here with traditional versus modern. And I think that you can still have a traditional design in the front, and it's still of its own time because nothing really replicates. It's exactly the same as the past. It still reads as a modern building. And so I think that the sensitivity to the past in this case, and this is Takoma Park, is really important. And people had very bad reactions to the modern design that I think you guys put forward on your first with your RFP, and so I just want to bring that up. It would be very helpful if we had renderings. When you come back and you show us pictures, when I look at some of these, they're truncated, and I would really like page, I think 7 and 8 show truncated views, and I'd really like you not to do that the next time you come forward, so that you're showing a street view, but I want to see the rest of the building standing up there. I want to see how it looks. I can, if you're puzzled about that, let me, page 8 and 9, I'm just referring to, where it would be nice to see how this all goes up, and not just have it truncated, so as part of an important element is chopped off. And I do agree with Willie that it's important to see the perspective of the neighboring buildings, and that's one of the things that's missing here. The fire station, for example, and I'd like to know the height of the fire station roof at the peak, and I don't know if you guys know that off the top, but I would like to know that. And the fire station is a public building. It's really not a commercial building. Our commercial buildings are lower than public buildings. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, and not to scale up to a public building, such as a fire station, that has just different importance and scale because of it. What you see around you in the junction are smaller buildings, and I want to see how this relates to, if you can show a view with the shopping center, the historic shopping center across the street versus this, if you could figure out a way to do that so we see how it lives together with the fire station. So we can see that perspective, because these are all going to be talking to each other, and we need to understand the dynamic here and how it all works. We have very low scale, early century buildings here. early 20th century building. So this is a bit overwhelming. So that would help us understand if you could show those kinds of pictures to us.
Did you have a response? There was a question in there about the fire station height. That just no expectation that you have that. If you did, okay. On the scale front, I understand the argument about the public relationship to the retail. I do, though, see this as an opportunity to provide distinction within the junction that, as we've already discussed up here, has some new businesses moving into it, but in many ways is not as commercially solid district as the center of Takoma Park. And I think there's, in terms of that, what that translates to aesthetically, I think there is space for this to, within the context, serve as a landmark. I think the scale speaks to a continuity from the downtown that I think has the potential to bridge the two. I think the comments about seeing some of the relationships beyond the immediate may illustrate that or not. They could be helpful to see. But just to sort of have flushed out our range of opinions, the scale, I wouldn't want to see something that went so small that we were losing any kind of distinction here. And okay, any further comments for this consultation? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for your feedback.
Probably got more feedback than you thought you were going to.
Okay, so moving on to old business. We've got board vacancies. We have a vacancy for a business owner or commercial property owner. Roz, I don't know if you had anything to add to that other than the fact that we have it.
So I just wanted to apologize and clarify about the reappointments. I have
right.
in hand the resolutions from council, I believe this was last week, reappointing the members whose terms were expiring. And so that's three of you sitting here and the alternate for Historic Tacoma as well. The rest of you have terms that continue at least another year. So I just wanted to clarify that. 7-member board, we do have the one vacancy for specifically for a business owner and or commercial property owner. So that's a slot that we need to fill. And just want to encourage you all, if there's someone you have in mind that you want to reach out to or you'd like me to reach out to, please say so or let me know. It'd be nice to get up to full strength.
Yeah, we're a small board, so. And I think that perspective is really helpful to have. I've certainly appreciated your input, Eric, as a nearby business owner. And did you want to? You're all set.
Do we do any sort of outreach, or do we just, I mean, how does it work for the business owner position?
We have, we've tried various things in the past. What we've discovered that works best is when either a board member or a fellow business member speaks to somebody else. We have put ads in the city newsletter. We've listed it among the board listing on the board page in the newsletter. Occasionally, we've done some, sort of Facebook postings from the city of general committee vacancies. But I think for this particular slot, it's really an invitation that seems to make the difference.
Anything more on that? No. So then, new business board officers. Wait, is that any different than what you just went over? Do you have something else to add? Okay.
So the April meeting traditionally is the business meeting of the board. The board chair and vice chair, co-chair, I can't remember what we call it, are one-year terms elected each year. And so those would have also expired at the end of March. So we'd need to elect new chairs.
So we can either do that now or have a business session.
You can do it now, certainly.
And it's 8 o'clock, so I'm trying to be mindful
Right.
of time. How are folks feeling about?
If you want to
You wanna
delay it to
discuss
the
it
next
briefly?
meeting.
No,
Yeah, you-
can I?
you
Wait,
can
I
serve
was
2 terms.
co-chair.
You can serve 2 terms as chair. You can change places with vice or co-chair.
Willie. And Willie was chair before that, and a member who's since rotated off was chair before that. I would be willing to, but I, certainly if anyone else is interested, Cricket.
She's not speaking. I mean,
I would say if you're willing.
I think you do an excellent job.
Well, thank you. And I guess, Willie, are you interested in continuing as co-chair? Is there any term duration?
Okay, so we just need
So
a
we'll-
vote. Somebody want to make a resolution?
Is it a motion? I move that we continue with Lucy as chair and Willie as co-chair for the next
Yeah, I
term.
second that. I don't want to lose either.
We vote for ourselves, right?
A vote for you, Willie. Yeah, right.
There you go.
And I apologize that I didn't. Roz suggested, and I agreed that it made sense to introduce the sheet beforehand and forgot. But perhaps it's something that we can look at our next review and continue to use. I think to some extent the sign was a little bit of a limited review for this to apply to, in that well, the sign only applies to certain attributes, but essentially, as I said earlier, it's the design guidelines distilled. But I think, especially as we've not had a whole lot of new construction. We had new construction come up as an addition last time. We now have the junction. There may very well be other reviews where having this outline, I think, might help us structure our feedback. I think I see it as something that I might try to use beforehand, the degree to which is possible, to kind of, as a reminder of kind of our scope and how it applies. There's certainly no requirement that you do that, but I think it's something that we can continue to use. And if you have any, it's not like something to be collected, but if it can help structure our responses, and if you have any feedback to it or would like to see something else, I think the goal was really just to have kind of a central reference point that was a bit shorter than the design guidelines, which can be a lot to take in when we're on the spot. So, okay. All right, well, then, did you have something to add?
Yeah, there was something. I just wanted we were supposed to talk about something else tonight based on the last meeting, and so.
The retroactive permits, perhaps, has been a topic.
Like that. Yeah, so I don't want us to lose that going forward.
Yeah, I think we had decided with the junction that we were likely to not have time tonight, but I agree that's something we can keep on the docket.
And a couple of things. Roz, the video from, when was it? March needs to be put up. Is it on the web? Okay, so it's accessible. When you go through the website, you can do it, because when I last looked at it, it wasn't on there, but.
All right, let me just make sure I get Roz recorded.
Let me just clarify where to find it. If you go to the TacomaParkMD.gov and get to the Facade Advisory Board page, there are 3 tables on the page. The first is membership, and the second is agenda and minutes and stuff like that, and the third is project reviews. So if you look at that agenda minutes table, the default is not the most recent first. So you may need, depending on what shows up first, you may need to reorder it, and you can do that by the heading of each column. So you can reorder it by date, and then as of today, for the last month, the March video is the first thing that shows up. Since we approved the minutes, I'll put up the March minutes tomorrow morning.
So
Sorry, Lorraine. Okay.
It was really easy for me to find the January. I mean, there's a little arrow there, and it's clearly shown when you go there that there's a video, but there's nothing showing the March at all. But that's up there now, and is easy, in his easiest way to find it is the January, correct?
Sorry. Did you see the March listing but not the video, or you didn't see any listing?
There was nothing for a long time. It just wasn't on there. Yeah.
Reorder the listings in that table.
We wouldn't want to have. We wouldn't want to have those things too hard to find, so that's good. And the other thing I wanted to ask you to please, when somebody comes forward with an application, if they can be sure to bring the existing condition, you can ask them to come with a photograph of the existing condition. I feel like we're at a disadvantage if we don't see that, and we must have that or just not hear it. I mean, I really put in a plea to you. Don't.
Oh, Roz has a response.
So the review today was not ideal. We've talked about having the whole HOP application packet a week in advance. And Lucy and I had some back and forth on wanting to be supportive and accommodating of new businesses who are not professionals in this area. And wanting to make sure that the board has enough information to do an adequate review. And so I appreciate the feedback. I feel like there's some judgment call, and I can make sure to ask for existing conditions as well, because I went back to them today and said location, materials, dimensions, manner in which it's affixed, but I didn't ask for existing. We also were used to being in the hydrangea room where I could pull it up on Google Maps and we could take a look at it, and so that's a bit, I probably could from the laptop, so we can talk about arranging that differently.
Yeah, and I think that's something, if folks feel strongly about requiring that more sternly, we should discuss it. I think Roz simply sent me an email posing the question, do we review it or not, based on the lack of material, and I wasn't surprised to hear that they were fairly new to the process, and I think it was a worthwhile conversation, but that's something we can certainly discuss as a board if there are any concerns. Yep, hold on just a second. All right.
Yeah, the problem with pulling it up is that you sometimes get a very old picture that's not it doesn't reflect. We had that situation with Sue where we couldn't tell what was going on when you pulled it up, and so that turns out to not be a great solution because they're old pictures up there, when you do that. So it's it's not a hard request to just ask them to give us a photograph of the existing condition. And also it's really great to not have something, the day of, kind of without that material. I mean, so that was
the call we were making, was simply, I mean, they were certainly asked. It was just a matter of do we accept their review today or not? And that if we decide we don't want to do that, we should discuss it and make a decision as a board.
I guess a way to approach it, I would suggest, is to find out where they are in the regulatory process and what their timelines are. And so clearly they have plenty of time. And so, that could be one way to help guide you. But having existing conditions is really, I think, an important thing. We might want to go out and look at it ahead of time, too, if it was.
All right, Roz has a response.
Yes, we ask ahead of time. We ask to have it all a week ahead of time to circulate to the board. I guess I have extra sympathy for people opening a new business because they are slammed. So while they may not be in the docket for HPC, the idea that they have extra time is probably not their reality. And so I feel like we want to be supportive of this, and we want to make sure, our two goals, to make sure that we maintain the character of the historic district and to offer the support to businesses who are trying to walk through this. Those who come to us who aren't on the docket are actually the ones that need the guidance the most because they don't know the process. Those who are already on the docket may be much more familiar with how this works.
Let's see, and Willie has also buzzed, so let me turn to him.
I think maybe as you did it, it was on a case by case. This one, I could get through it and not worry that it's going to be bad. You know what I mean?
I think we shouldn't feel any expectation to approve something just because it's come before us. And I think that was the point at which I felt willing to accommodate. And then, we made the decision today that it didn't need to be further, so case by case.
Yeah, so if it was a different condition, maybe a different building, and maybe a different proposed sign, where you had the same lack of information, I don't think that's, me personally, if I can't understand what they're proposing, then I completely agree. We would probably decide, or you probably would have decided at that time, there's not enough information here. But this one, you know, I could get there and understand what is it they're proposing, what the scale of the sign is, the scale of the entrance, and then put the two together and then say, okay, and make, as we did, a ruling. So.
All right.
It's not hard to ask for an existing photo from even a new applicant. I mean, it's really, I mean, they're already doing a photo. They probably have one if they did that blot out and just include it. So I think, you know, I struggled a little bit with it in terms of understanding, you know, exactly where it was going to go. And so I think it just would have been helpful to have. And so if you could please make sure that, you know, in the future, that would be really great. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is that I don't think we as a board really discussed together having a 2-minute limitation on people speaking rather than 3. The city council has 3. You know, we rarely have people come. It's interesting to hear neighbors' comments, and I feel like we're making them. I mean, what's the difference between 2 and 3? And I don't feel picking something as short as 2 is the right thing to do. And I object to that, and I don't believe we decided as a board or discussed it. And I think it should be as long. It should be a 3-minute time as the city council has, and we haven't had a chance to talk about that. But I think the board should decide that, not city staff. The board should, and that's my position on it. So I don't know if we have talked about it. I don't remember any conversation about that. But it just, when you're up there at the podium, it's very hard for people to collect their thoughts and to understand what they're saying. I don't expect, this is not going to be like city council meetings, but it's just polite to let them at least have time to finish their thoughts, and I really question that 2 minutes is an adequate amount of time, and it's different than the cities. I see no reason for it.
So this is the first time in a while that we've had public comment,
Right.
And I think your point that we can discuss that before the next time we anticipate, before at the next meeting. I think we're getting late enough that I don't want to talk about it now,
Right.
but we can certainly
Right.
talk about it at the next meeting.
Put it on the
I
agenda.
think we need standards, and we can certainly discuss it, but I would just emphasize our board rarely has members of the public. It is great to have that input, but it is something new, so we can certainly talk about it. Eric, did you want to add something?
I was going to wait until the next meeting, but no, watching the people come up, I mean, I'm in the theater, and theater people know that the hardest thing for the average person to do is do public speaking. Not only public speaking, now they're going to stand at a podium. They're going to be staring at us. They're going to use a microphone, and they have all this stuff they want to say, and it was uncomfortable to watch because they had just gotten into what they wanted to say, and then all of a sudden, up. And they're watching that light, and they didn't realize what time is time. And yeah, 3 minutes is it's a nice slow dance. You know, 3 minutes is a good amount of time.
Okay, well, we'll add that to our agenda for next month to discuss. All right, meeting adjourned.